It's All Things Considered, and I'm Dave Lawrence. We're continuing with the latest guest in our Off the Road series of interviews, musicians remotely sharing their experiences during the pandemic and other crises. Hear everything we've done so far, including hours of storytelling and several exclusive musical performances at hawaiipublicradio.org. That's where you can hear the first part of our chat with Jon Anderson, the voice of Yes for decades, a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, who explained his remarkable spiritual connection to Hawaii. He also recently released an album, 1,000 Hands, which he actually started decades ago, and it's filled with guests from across the musical spectrum, as Jon told us.
I recorded most of the songs in the mountains of Big Bear near Los Angeles in 1990, learning about meditation, so I was enjoying myself. I was very clear in my head about what I'd like to sing about, and everything's a challenge. Most of the songs are about how we go through these challenges. In fact, openness and spirituality and awakening, being very grateful for life and for Mother Earth and be the gardeners of the earth, because we are. That's what we're supposed to be doing, taking care of Mother Earth instead of destroying it.
And it's worth noting you started recording this really spiritual album after getting on a spiritual path thanks to your Hawaii connections.
Because in fact, I was told that Hawaii is the heart chakra of the planet, and I'm sure it is. There's something very, very special.
And that it's cool, this goes back, you kind of answered it, this is an album that has roots going back several decades and that Jon kind of shelved, then eventually revived. And you didn't just revive it, it's pretty impressive in the number of folks you've included. In fact, the title kind of refers, 1,000 Hands, to the number of folks you credit.
Yeah, when I started the album, I found out that Chris Squire and Alan White were in Los Angeles, and then I was in touch with a guy from the Beach Boys, Bruce Johnson.
Those were recorded back in the early 90s, and then flash forward to just a few years ago.
Got contacted by the producer, Michael Franklin, who lives in Orlando. He called me about 2 years ago and said, "Look, Jon, you know those tapes you were working on up in Big Bear?" I said, "Oh, yeah. Where are they?" I said, "I think they're in my garage." So I went and I got these very big tapes, the 24-track tapes. And I sent them all to Michael Franklin, and he put them in an oven. You have to bake them.
Right. Yeah.
And then they can only play once because they've been sitting around. It's tape, it'll just dissolve. It'll just play once and then go straight to the computer. And that's basically what happened. And I listened and went, "Oh my gosh, they sound really good." And he said, "You mentioned you wanted to put musicians on that you like." And I said, "Well, I like Billy Cobham, and I really like Jon Anderson and Jean-Luc Ponty. I'd just been on tour with him." And Michael said, "I know Chick Corea." And I went, "Oh, quick." So all of a sudden, these people started playing on the record. And thankfully, Michael Franklin just seemed to know the right people. He got the Tower of Power brass section. So it's kind of interesting how just when we were finishing the album about a year and a half ago, I said to Michael, "I think I should ask Steve Howe to play on it, because it would be kind of cool that I've got Chris Squire, Alan White, and then Steve Howe to play on it."
3 of your bandmates and critical musicians from the band Yes.
And he did. And it was just a magical moment for me. So there's so much that went into making the album. It's quite an extraordinary adventure.
It is, and some of these cats no longer with us. You have Larry Coryell and Chris Squire on there. Of all the people on the record, because you kind of singled out your Yes colleagues that you've had, and again, it's Jon Anderson talking about 1,000 Hands. Of all the people on here, Jon, the ones you personally go back the furthest with would be the gang from Yes. Can you remember when you first met any of those guys, Steve or Chris? Or...
Well, I met Chris in a bar that I was working in, and the bar was above a very famous rock and roll club called the Marquee Club in London.
Yeah.
Whoever played in the Marquee would come up into the bar before the show and after the show, and I'd be cleaning up and tidying up. In one evening, you could have like Pete Townsend would come up with Keith Moon, because the Who were playing downstairs in the club. Eric Clapton, and then a couple of guys from Led Zeppelin, and even Jimi Hendrix came in one time. And I never spoke to them because I was so kind of shy in a way. It was a remarkable period because I wanted to join a band. I'd been working with my first band, the Warriors, for 5 years, and I'd left them in Germany because they wouldn't get out of bed and rehearse. And it got me so upset. So I left them. Well, they told me to get away, in not those words, but they told me, John, just go away. So I went. And then eventually I found myself in London, and I worked in this club. And one night, the owner of the club, Jack, said, behind the corner there by himself, he has a band, and I think he's looking for a singer. So I walk over to this very tall man who's 6'3", and looked up to him and said, hi, I'm Jon Anderson. Who are you? And he said, my name's Chris Squire. And I said, oh, cool. So we started talking about music in general. Simon and Garfunkel record has just been released. We love the Beatles, of course. We love Frank Zappa, Buffalo Springfield, and music like that. And so went back to his apartment. We wrote a couple of songs together. He played me some tapes of his band.
What was it called?
Mabel Greer's Toy Shop. And I used to say, that's a very long title for a band, we've got to shorten it up. So I went to rehearsals about 2 days later, and the drummer had left. So Chris, a guitarist, Peter Banks, and a keyboard player, Tony Kay. So we started looking for a drummer. In the newspaper, you get the Melody Maker, and you look at the back for advertising, and there was an advertisement, and it said, drummer, I have a Ludwig kit and a van. So right away we said, quick, let's get him in. He's got a band. Whether he can play, I don't know. And then Bill Bruford turned up the following day with a minivan. It was like a mini car van. It was so small. So he had his kit, which wasn't really a Ludwig, but man, he could play great. So we started playing and rehearsing, and that's how the band started going.
And neat that you come full circle. It's the great Jon Anderson, the voice of Yes for so many years. Huge spiritual connection to the islands. John, I really do hope that this was a fun interview for you today, or at least one that got your mind working a little bit there as you sit in your home studio. Yeah,
wonderful. Thanks, Dave, and I appreciate it. And we can't wait to get back to Kauai for our holidays.
You're an animal over there. I give you big hugs and high fives. Stay safe.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you. Take care. I'll see you.